Welcome to Do What Matters Most. This is episode 8 in the series, To Love and Be Loved. We know that what we think eventually emerges in our language, emotions, and actions. That is why what we think about ourselves can and often does influence our abilities to love and receive love. Learn how to change what you think to create the greatest possibilities for love and happiness.
So far in this series about how to expand love, I have proposed that most of us could experience a whole lot more than we do, and we can get better at communicating and better at receiving it. But inside our minds and inside our lives, there might be no ceiling to it. And if we explored that possibility, we might be able to feel it more broadly and more intensely. And we might even be able to make it a richer and better part of our lives for ourselves and for others. Now, in part 3 of this series about expanding love, I'm going to point out that what you think about yourself matters a great deal. Up to now, in our efforts to expand the capacity for love, I proposed that neurological research makes it possible if we are willing to create the right experiences. That is, experiences that are roughly similar, and they involve thoughts and emotions and sometimes how we act. I would like to point out that one person can engage in these activities, but it is far better if both people in a marriage do it at the same time. I've tried it with individuals, and it works well for them. It is less exciting, however, than when they have a partner who's engaged too. I suggested in the early episodes that you will need to get rid of the idea that other people cause what you feel, and part of what that is necessary is to eliminate criticism, blame, and condemnation. Criticism is communicating the behavior of the other person is not adequate or causes you problems. Blame is assigning responsibility for it to the other person and condemning it. Sometimes you do that by communicating rejection and hostility. Now, condemnation is assigned to them some form of punishment. When they are condemned, then they are condemned to be a terrible person or a permanent failure. In any case, the message of criticism and blame and condemnation is the same. You are telling your spouse that you believe that he or she is incompetent. The second aspect of expanding love is to address and question freedom and make it a part of communication, decision-making, and of one's own choices. It should be fairly obvious that criticizing, blaming, and condemning can reduce freedom for both people. This doesn't mean that we can't talk about things and improve it, but it does mean that we just can't assign with anger, sarcasm, and ridicule the idea that one person believes the other is incompetent and get away with it. So, protecting, creating, and preserving one's freedom and respecting it in your partner and in your own life is an essential part of love because of freedom's close tied to love. It is positively correlated. If you reduce feelings of freedom, you'll reduce feelings of love. It's as simple as that. Now, respecting freedom is accomplished by defining it, talking about it, bringing it up to evaluate its role in what you do for many situations, and it's also important that you learn to appreciate the value of it in your own life. Do you feel free when you talk about money? Do you feel free when you work together and talk about your children, discuss differences, focus on your physical relationship? And do you feel free in many other circumstances? You might take a look at freedom to see how you fit in with friends and with institutions and other kinds of experiences. Now, it's likely true that there are some situations where we are obligated, where we have some burdens which we have accepted, and we don't feel free, particularly at that point in time. But if you begin to respect the role of freedom, even in those circumstances, you begin to work out some form of experience that allows you to feel more free. Now, having given a review and focus on eliminating criticism and blame and so on, and the expansion of freedom, or what diminishes it, now please consider another part of the recipe for expanding the love you can feel and have with your spouse. Married people create what are called interaction patterns, that is, habitual ways of communicating Now, please understand that communicating means your words, your emotional behavior, and your actions. And it also includes time. If you're prompt, not prompt, if you're on time, if you follow through, all these things communicate. Now, when these are expressed, they become linked to a couple's communication patterns and appear whenever certain situations arise. For example, if a couple early on has a conversation about money and both get angry, then after a very few arguments where anger is involved, the very next time money is a topic, then anger might also be present as well. Many discussions can be like this. If one spouse is criticized in another situation, such as language, dress, emotional behavior of some kind, this criticism can become ritualized and becomes part of the marriage relationship. Being on time or being late might be one of these, or not respecting one's value or idea or appreciating what they want to do. After a while, a couple's marriage and your marriage might consist of some good times where there's a certain amount of love, times where there are no problems, which are also we consider to be good, and sometimes marked by these ritualized kind of conflicts. There are several issues which involve in these patterns. One is that when they are hurtful, then the memories of the emotional pain are remembered as fear, and when repeated, the fear about that specific event becomes linked or generalized to the fear of not being loved. So a lot of little separate hurtful events is generalized by the human brain into, in this situation where love is supposed to happen, I might in fact not be loved. Now, this fear can appear sporadically or it can become a major part of any relationship. In any case, the fear and then the negative communication reduces people's sense of freedom, limits the love which exists between them. It can become so much a part of a relationship that even very innocent comments, such as I'm just talking about the weather, even praise or warmth, which is real positive, anything can be misinterpreted by another person as something negative or hostile. Attempts by one person to make changes, for example, are often presented because it's misinterpreted, ridiculed sometimes, and includes a lot of defensiveness. So how do we solve this problem to expand your capacity to love? What does it take for us to free ourselves from the idea that we think our emotional life is dependent on the behavior of other people? They either cause our unhappiness or they're supposed to cause our happiness. There's an interesting method, and it involves how you think about yourself. As it turns out, what you think about becomes clusters of brain cells, just like anything else, and when you think about yourself, these thoughts follow the same rule. They will eventually emerge in your language, emotions, and actions. They can have power to influence, and they are often not just a routine mental activity that has no bearing of any kind. In certain cases of mental illness, for example, an individual can become so intensely focused on a thought or a stream of thought, it can immobilize him or her. Well, this is not exactly like that. It is instead recognizing that what you think about yourself in terms of accuracy or inaccuracy, or positive or negative, will eventually spill over into how you see yourself and often the other person, and of course how you treat the other person or participate in your marriage. There's something else involved which is very important for me to pay attention to. When you're trying to rid yourselves of an idea that all of your feelings are caused by someone else, you can cure that in yourself by learning a form of responsibility about what you think about. Now, what this means, for example, is that you take a look at your own thoughts about yourself and you examine them and you see, well, I may not think about myself very often because I'm spending so much time worried about other people. Or I might not think about myself because I'm under a lot of pressure and I've got to get a lot of work done. Or on some occasions, you might not think about yourself because you're busy with kindness and service. However, there are times when every individual reflects on himself or herself, and these reflections invite you to take a look at and think about how you're measuring your life. Are you measuring yourself by how much money you make, how many friends you have. Are you measuring yourself by the achievements or the fame that you produce? Or are you measuring yourself by the quality of your internal experience? Which means that if you are kind to yourself and you develop a form of self-love, not arrogance or pride, but self-love where you give yourself a tendency to be patient, and you're looking at yourself and thinking, all right, well, I'm doing okay. Now, a lot of psychologists and other mental health professionals understand how important that is, and how important it is for people who have addictions, people who are lonely, people who are discouraged and depressed or anxious. And so they begin to think about this. They need to find a way to help every individual manage or begin to exert responsibility for the very thoughts that they think. Now imagine this. Let's suppose you get up in the morning and you start off the day by thinking, all right, today I am going to take a look at what I think about myself. Some of these will be so practiced that they will be automatic and you won't even notice them. But let's suppose you're thinking, you look in the mirror and you think, well, I'm not as good looking as I would like to be. Well, all right. You might think, well, that'll motivate me. Well, typically, thinking negative things about yourself doesn't motivate much. It might one day. But let's suppose you change that thought to this one. Well, I might change my makeup, or I might change my hairstyle. I might do something else so that I could, be happier with how I look. Or suppose you're thinking about yourself as a spouse, and you're thinking, gee, sometimes I don't do this enough. Or sometimes I wish I did that better. Now, if you really want to improve your capacity for love, you'll start changing those thoughts that you think about yourself and thoughts that you think when you meditate and reflect about yourself into something constructive and positive, even optimistic. It's not that difficult. And the point of this exercise is the love could be expanded even if you're trying to do that and you're not yet perfect. Just imagine what would happen if you had the value, the idea that you're going to gradually over time diminish the negative or inaccurate thoughts you have about yourself and replace them with things that are more positive and more accurate. One of the things that happens is quite wonderful. When you start this process of correcting or better managing the thoughts you have about yourself, and you go along for a little while, one of the things you'll notice is that your brain will start producing thoughts that lead to a stronger sense of self. You might call it confidence, but it's like, I can be assertive. That is, I can voice my opinion. I can accomplish things that I didn't think I used to be able to. Or, I can feel and find talents or abilities in myself that I never used to believe were true. Now, this is not a happenstance, not something that's magical, and we don't know where it comes from. We do. It comes right from this. All you have to do is start off on the idea that you're going to begin modifying a negative or an inaccurate thought about yourself and replacing those with things that are accurate and things which are positive. Now, you might think, well, how do I know that something I believe about myself is inaccurate? I will tell you. You typically will not see that thought that's inaccurate. An inaccurate thought typically is something you think about yourself which is not matched by how you act or by the circumstances. I'll give you a for instance. Researchers wanted to know how often people are accurate about their own behavior. So they got a bunch of people together and had them mix in a social situation. They're eating hors d'oeuvres and talking and so on. And after 30 minutes or so, after videotaping them, they give them a survey and asked them how they viewed themselves. Well, when they looked at themselves on the video and looked at the results of the survey, they discovered that individuals never got more than 30% accurate. That is, the view they had about themselves and imagined themselves doing was 70% inaccurate. That is, they didn't identify as doing what the videotapes actually produced. Now, what this means is that a lot of the things we think about ourselves might be subject to increased accuracy if we'll give some thought about them. So the next question is, well, how do we make them then more accurate? Well, we can talk about them and display them around people we trust, but more importantly, you can do the following. Let's suppose that you decided to make an individual map, and this map is husband or wife behavior. And you put on this map 7 or 8 or 9, 10 or how many positive qualities or characteristics you would like to display when you're with your spouse. And then you get up in the morning and you say, I'm going to work on these 2 or 3 things today. Could be kindness, could be a question asking, could be give a compliment. It could be affection. I'm going to do any of those positive things. Now, let's suppose you do that, and at the end of the day, you ask yourself this question, how did I do? Now, you're not asking what you think the other person thinks. You're asking yourself, did I carry out the items that are wrote on my map? Now, those that you do typically are the ones that are accurate. If you laid them out on your map and you didn't carry them out, then there's probably an area for some improvement about how accurate you are about what you think about yourself. Now, it is not a good thing, of course, for us to believe a bunch of things about ourselves which are false. So, in a while, I will explain to you how we can correct that in the process in our marriage. But for now, I'm just pointing out to you that you want to take a look at what you believe about yourself and then add the notion that I'm going to change the negative to something positive, and I'm going to take a look and say, is that belief I have about myself really accurate? That is, do I really do what I think I'm doing? Am I really able to do those things? Am I more positive than I typically believe that I am? My experience is that most inaccurate beliefs tend to overemphasize the role of negative qualities, and that when people believe something positive about themselves, they're more likely to be accurate if the purpose for the positive thoughts are not to gain fame, not to be popular, not to win something, but to simply produce self-satisfaction. It's like saying, well, can I say hello to people when I'm shy? And I say hello to people, and I, at the end of the day, say, how did I do? And I say, I did. I said hello to people, and now I am making the belief I have about myself accurate because I actually carry it out in my actions. Now, the most important thing for this part of how to expand love is to realize that assuming greater responsibility for your thoughts is the way you get rid of, maybe there are others, but it is a way you get rid of the dependence and the control that you feel when you're inside a relationship and you don't feel free. It gets rid of the tendency to blame and criticize as a way of handling situations, and it enables you to more confidently say, well, no, that's me, and I can correct that, and I can solve that, which actually adds another dimension of happiness to any marriage. Now, I am hopeful that you'll try this, that you'll start, and you'll just do a little bit every day. You make it a sort of a long-term process. You don't have to hurry with it. You can do 1 or 2 or 3 a day, and that'll be sufficient. You will find out in a very short while that doing so will change your view of yourself. It might also change the way you participate and make you more effective in your marriage.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Do What Matters Most, which is sponsored by FirstAnswers.com, where you can find new tools for families and parents of 21st century kids with a focus on emotional self-reliance. Visit FirstAnswers.com to sign up for a free newsletter. Find Do What Matters Most on Facebook and our website, mattersmostmedia.org, where you can ask Dr. Scoresby your own questions. Remember to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. Give us a rating and write a review on the podcast app or Google Podcasts, and let us know what you think about Do What Matters Most.